have time for some questions. If anyone needs to leave, go ahead. But otherwise, we'll have 10 or 15 minutes for any questions from the floor.
I just have a question regarding practice. And you talked about study, contemplation, and meditation. And particularly studying, and it just sounds like the in-depth study is what happens with monastics or specialists at the monastery. What type of practice and study instructions do you tend to give to householders or people, lay people working in everyday life?
Larong Garna, Rakshungur Kurku, Tosum Gonsung, that is a Jonkabu Naga, that Juji, Juji, Yahazi Yore. They don't have a chunk, Juji and Shidro. System. That Chimbago Shunina, Unsu, Ansan Gail Katariga. Gasa Kalan Zambolan the Choyo, Posamatena, the Niji, Jigitana, Gonzon Lami, Jarlon, Dan Lavram, Chimboda, Dejan the No Jon, Perna, Woma, Yan Tabma, Riktir, that Tila Sopa, the Tama, the Chimbayana, Chimbaga, Lopson Tatida, Juji, Tosum Gonsum, Juji, Zendata, Remba, Idana, Shok Sosona, Rango Chongkirka, Nanda, the Jadia Sola Tenitan, the Lojon Hasan Tariga. Yeah,
it's true that at the monastery then it is a systematic process for education, as I described with those 5 great sutra categories, and then on from there, that's for the monastics. Now for the lay people who have busy lifestyles and so on, they have to kind of, catch the Dharma how they can and when they can, for instance, in the different Dharma centers that are located around the world or on the internet. And they can learn the important basic text to study, such as Bodhicharya Avatara, Patrul Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher, Kunzang Lami Shalong, Je Tsongkhapa's stages, gradual stages of the path, Lamrim Chenmo, and Umagen, Ornament of the Middle Way. And these kind of texts should be studied, would be studied, and they'll be guided by their respective teachers in the same process of study, contemplation, and meditation. So that part doesn't differ. It's just that the order of the subjects may be a little different. It won't be so systematic.
We have the opportunity to try to help the students here at the university with contemplation and different sort of spiritual activities. But we don't usually teach them about past and future lives, because that narrative is caught up in a religion, and this is a public university. So are we doing them any favors or great benefit by not encouraging renunciation, but yet teaching them ways to feel better by these various practices?
Ta de ngatu lopcha ngai na tene ta perna janang nei na ta osutli na ta tene khela ta ta na tene parchir ta Singapore tera to chama parchin dag chulug nando ta lopcha ga ta lokso ga naman jong ki ta kane na ta ri ji dis kamon zo song yo re te jimsun mong go le zambo ga jakap soma chi re innayo the Lopchag Lomada Gergan Sayan, Chun the Yansalona, Lopchag non connect you Nibayo Mare. Cherizena, Matsu Chu Gergan Dana, Lopra Dena, so in Jicting, Shionda, Laxer, then they so young you Lopade. Then it Chu Lopran Dena, then it Gumba in Nandaga, the Mayan Baga Tansan Dariga, then it Darjaga Tanayan, that it chatted Mombo Yokidan. Then it Gergan Wayana, Gergan Tanya Patinja. And they so Latin than should the Ramji, the Kualana, Netena, Lopcha, and go to shoot the step the boy on your mat and take Gubayam and do some.
Yeah, what you bring up is not just only true here. In my experience now, having been around to the different universities in China, in America, in Australia, in Canada, in Singapore, in all these places, it's the same. Within the traditional educational facility, it's not appropriate to speak on religion for obvious reasons. And so that should be avoided. But that doesn't mean that teachers who have the capacity to teach the different traditions of spiritual development can't hold classes outside of the university setting, right? And so that kind of, in those kinds of environments, those instructions can still be given. They don't have to only be given in a school. They can be given elsewhere, just like they are appearing online on the internet, and students can learn outside of school to improve their understanding. And so I agree that there's no reason to have to give religious teachings in this kind of environment, that that's not going to happen, but it's also not necessary. It can happen elsewhere in other ways.
옛날에 출라 점직시는 저기를 삼고 그러나 민족 샹첩 그센 담에 그타와데 좀이 그 저제가 나는 저래다나 때라 점직시나 때 출을 대각만 보고 당상 종 강으로 강작 강으로 와서 근데 점직시 근데 아 대단 자장가 출근 난동 가리다 근데 로정 시기다 점직시는 때나 때 야버려서.
And you can also analyze and research these different subjects as part of your own process. And then you can use that knowledge to continue and develop your education in the school setting. It doesn't need to be exempt of that, but that you just use other terminology and so forth. For example, you can research the subject of renunciation, you can research the subject of the selflessness of the person, and the cultivation of altruism and so on. And then with other kinds of terminology, you can bring that into the general education.
In the United States, there are many female Buddhist practitioners and teachers, maybe more than ever in history. And yet there are not a lot of historical accounts of female practitioners and teachers and scholars available to Americans. And I was wondering if you would be willing to talk about the role of women in your lineage, or a particular short story for us, so that we can learn a little bit about women in your tradition, and also together have a kind of little piece of history that needs to be told. In your particular lineage. Thank you.
땅이 따스타간디 라롱 간르진잖아. 아더니 파처를 잡아다 조모는 나서 조모 월메크 다르게 추바데 망고요. 아니 다 길근 거 간다 시나야. 자와가 다리금 칸보 길근베 그 조모가 길근 거 아마세 송. 아니 운수 다리 따스타게나 다슬롭자가 lokzozer kona라 랑촌도 아더니 단 칸로만 멈소 아니 콩것더니 자와금 캄보차가다는 캄보차가 참아 지금 잘고 쳔보 왕 그렇게다 아더니 다리가 다 추차 다리 송야는 된다 다리가 샤시고요 더니 nga 옛날에 야나가 다지 추바소 다리가 더니 다른 시기 쉬어 대난 수 야나가요 더니 조모다는 야 라마 들이처럼요 그 야초 망보고 더니 야 조모 망고요 야디 캄모다는 그 야금 캄보 체크 들이처럼요 캄모 더니 장거 망고요 더니나 그 니 지금 다 로직을 떠나다는 로직 모셔줘야 예체를 그만두시나 그 가서 되는 그 원래 그 지금 다 추어 로종 시기 그러나 나이나 근데 사차간의 소속이 아마 지금 추석 먹어요. 추석과 팔체와가 다 개체 든치야 그 속소 참아다 다리 다 범맥 다리 송다.
Yes, in our monastic college, Larungar, this encampment in Golok, if we look at the number of male monastics and compare them to the number of female monastics, the monks and the nuns, there are more nuns. And likewise, if we look at the number of Kempos who achieve the degree of the doctorate of philosophy or whatever, the Kempo, the males and the females, there are more females. There's more Kenmos than there are Kempos. And so this is remarkable. And also in our entire institution, the principal teacher, the head master, is a female, Kandrama Mumso. And so she's Dakini, and she is the one who confers the important empowerments upon everyone, male and female, and the crucial commentary teachings, so as to know how to practice. And so, therefore, this speaks for itself. I could tell you many other stories, but among Chinese practitioners, there are hundreds more nuns than there are monks. Among Chinese practitioners, there are many more female abbots than there are male. And so that just gives you an idea of how the Dharma is proceeding in our area. Now, I'm going to teach Dharma and visit centers all over the world, and I also find that it's about 70% females who come to teach, to receive the teachings and to practice. So it kind of speaks for itself.
Yes? Yes. So we come into this world equal. And yet we have different karma. So I'm wondering, is the suffering that's imposed on each of us the same? And those with karma who may be more advanced, do they have a different role?
Ramnim go yonre ta marana su su kiwa ngama ga le sa jo ta manjai jirondi ta ga lala ji ju yo na ze ya na ane tari ga kanga thak ya na sonum da dambai ji da lala da ya ji tari ga te ta ju zri na da thobi na da kanga thak ya na te ta jinran ba ba shina ya den da yongo mare na ta sa so chen go ma chama go 그런 좀 맞추시나 당 이버도 톱지를 상대야. 다 얘나야 마체가 결론 라모 쳤네. 맞좀 코나고 연구요 말해. 근데 세 감이 레 코나야 아주 상계와 도저다나 레 코나야 양세고 말해. 얘나 다른 때라들이 지킨 따따가 지킨 모습을 건드다. 다 그런 딸이야나 감아가 레스다나 따티 킨다. 지킨 좀 이렇게런디 되네. 다리 등물이야. 다리 정지다. 대화야 정지원도 오늘 그 그거 와서 추구세니나 그 지킨 땜지는 그게다나 대전도 다리가 다 나마 지시 따티 리라도 심아 가르치 따티 레라도 제담도 그렇게나 디모송을 대나 티고 똑고 다 레젠 그게 하장 다리가 가르치와래 지금 몸밤 졸라서 비까는데 하장 좀 송을 대나 당이 대랑 디모즈 막도에 지금 시키십니까?
He likes your beard. And yes, it's true that we are all born equal, as we believe. But according to Buddhist teachings, then we have had different past lifetimes. It doesn't mean that we are inherently different, but karmically we have different situations that have produced the causes for what we experience now in our present lifetime, which is why some people, I mean, we're all different, but let's just put it into the two obvious categories for understanding. Some have more abundance, have more prosperity and opportunity. It seems that they're more endowed with merit than others. because there are others who, no matter what they do, can't seem to get ahead and don't seem to have the same endowment of merit. And so in Buddhism, we don't believe that this is fate. For example, that what you did in your last life is going to determine who you are now and nothing can be done about it. That through effort and exertion, it definitely can be changed, improved upon, and transformed. We believe this, that is for sure. It's not static. However, one has to, be able to apply the exertion in order to do that. Because all phenomena is based on dependent origination, root causes and contributing circumstances that link together, and that this cannot be separated. Just as the sutras tell us, as it's mentioned also in the Abhidharma, that whoever you are now, it's the result of what you've been in the past. And if you want to know what you're going to be in the future, then look what you're doing now, and that's going to determine the result of how your future life will be.
So my first question is, in Tibetan tradition, especially Mahayana tradition, we talk about motivation as a key practice. So I was wondering whether Khambu Rinpoche can talk about the motivation. So because of motivation, there's no really contradictory between the Dharma practice and the world life, and this life and next life, and helping others and benefits yourself. So I wanted Khambu Rinpoche explain about the benefits, motivation, and how to practice Mahayana motivation, make it the Dharma and the spiritual life and the world life is not contradictory. My first question. The second question is, so from outside we've been heard as it seems Tibetan situation based on language's decline, and the cities are changing. I mean, people move to city and young people don't speak no longer the Tibetans. So I'm wondering how hopeful Khambu Rinpoche think the Tibetan Buddhist culture and Tibetan culture in general can be preserved in the future. What did you?
Shirna Samba Zong to go, Tani Chirizena, Tani Gypsum Zonka, Chimbo, Satan, Samba Zona, Satan, Samba Gana, Satan Lamian, Tosson. Tani Renzin Jimmy Lambe, to go Beard Zingin, Chechon Jimin. So that Samba, they are on the Shiki. Shito was an English Jisman, Samba, the song. That day in Nasha, Samba money that Garchiori. That Samba to Zong Yona got sent to Shima Tancha, Dichi Yona, Dichi Sama, Gomer is a Katun, Chay on the Mare. Diana Samba Zong to send the lion, Davy just period, just so period. Then if Samba Zong the Shimalayan that you so carry on the race, that they take people so good. Then now Samba Zong Tindas you did that same day. The shower to Tamchet and Garjon and Garjon Marizena. Near Sano Tana, where now Nimjung of Samba Yang Tabazu Yuni in Na, the Tsin Doga, a Ranga Tariga, that Sardam Tamba, Chudam Tamba shower to Novotella. Gati Maresanga. Where now, Musu Logiga Tana in Zamon on a Shichi Hajan Chivago, and Tanzanga Kiyamo. Version Donata, where not a Kebayamo Shimyoji. Retan Kotsu Tariga, Samba number Taba, Tif, Tokane, and Marilla Shichi and Yachimbo, Kuransu, Rangatoyam, Tariga, and Joyot. The Logita, son of Tajana. Wokangana Haja Mamboz can be Tenjangana, Raptor Chumar Tenjangana, Yopion. The Inichona, the Garia Samnina, Chudan Jictinigan Gargas, the Chudan Jictinigan Gardi on the San Tombos, where now Gypsum Malari Pastavagan, San Tombos again, and Jictin Tamsu Japtogona, and Jingan. They shoot all Maljana, and in Jictin Dorson. Retan, certain Chuba number Tabazi, the Gayan Tabadres only, Penny, Tariga, Jictin the down, the Yapton Durkovi, Nibayan on Mari, Dansayan, the Zamolanga Chubatana, Zamolanga, Teneta, Lama, Chachuja Mombozakanina, 첸더라 다리 참말라 다리 지금 추가 람톤시 저용하단 첸더시니까라 판바도 비우는 보통 남타라 때나 고지 다 디몬스래 아니 추저라 니바데나 다 마오와나 지금 수다리가 같이 이게를 너소다리 간장 열내인다 또 하장 꼭가 뭐래 가서대로 잠보는 거 같다 이게 그 gen식을 너소이네나 하장 다리가 더니 지금 인기랑 진짜 그 손제 그러나 다 인지 같다와다나 야나 같다와는 정도나 다 당상다리 합쇼다 너쇼거네 그 사차강다 강나나 하장 잡게 침보래 또 마연 바가네는 더니 나츠 오이 워크 그 수시사즈 거네나 잠보는 거 지금 같다나 이게 다 니모 모즈도나 더니 지금 로레 신도나 테라다리가 다 냥긋 지리바스도 다리가 조요네 근데 마오네 그 지금 간단하네 그 나츠야나 세고나 하자 까모래 그 딸이오나 그 나츠 디름디 머즈기네 소티 나츠 스칸다네 이게 더 좋다다 저는 하자 친구 실고상가 또 머레레진다 라오네요 다리 딜랭게요 바스레 근데 지금 신나요네나 다가 나나요네나 다 근데 사쇼 강나요네나 근데 라나 소수 다리가 신나 잠오는 거 까르 삼치다 신나 하자 여보래 마토잖아 나는 생잖아 근데 지금 쇼소시 용됐더니 다 공부 포포는 그런데 근데 까르 탐치다 시기도 같이 디 난게요 다 당상 런거 같이 런거 이게지 뭐요래 가서 오네 콩나다 그 뭐버스 그 가서 포크 갖고 더니 같이 시험인데 와 하리키 그 셈나 여러치 뭐 가서 코나지 김에 롭자 침보 강다 강소나 콩나다 너쇼고 뭐 남거더니 와서 오이거다는 오이 하정 다른 회발기로 있기도 오늘 지금 딱 상록던 거사 그랬어 와서 보바가 뭐 탐치 그 워크 오이 지시시에다 따따르마 신은 장소가 마셔봐 가리고 정말 상록당고.
Yeah, in my point of view, there's no contradiction really between spiritual and worldly development. And the reason is because I'm hopeful that this is definitely true. And it's because, as the great Je Tsongkhapa said, if one has a noble outlook, then one's path of life will be successful. If one has an ignoble outlook, then one's path of life will be unsuccessful. And likewise, great masters such as Jigme Lingpa remind us that everything is dependent upon our mental attitude and that we shouldn't follow the reflection of external phenomena in terms of what seems to be positive and negative, that we should internalize and check our mind because it is the mind that creates that which is positive or negative. And so it is pointing out how we have to always examine our own mental motivation. And it's not really the case whereby happiness or suffering are going to come about just naturally as a matter of course, that this is something that our own mind is producing continuously. And so the cause for happiness is to have a positive, noble outlook, a good motivation. And there will be happiness in this and future lifetimes. Does that contradict worldly life? No, that's the truth across the board. That may be a spiritual statement, but it is applicable to ordinary worldly life. There's no contradiction whatsoever. So if we look at great tulkus and masters who have reincarnated in the world, and also great scholars, those people, male and female, that we want to emulate, that we respect tremendously, they are able to not only benefit themselves by having completely refined their personal motivation, but through that they're able to benefit others. Now, benefiting others means in worldly life, right? That's not just only your own spiritual inner meditation or realization. That's how you affect the world and how you bring that out into society, and how it is able to be something that has an effect on others. That is what is meant by not being contradictory. Although some may think that spiritual development is something other than worldly development, in truth it really is not. Unless you take an example such as Jetsun Milarepa, who really went for the ultimate goal in this very lifetime, and so he needed to forsake all of the worldliness and all of the ordinary life and just only practice as an ascetic in the mountains to attain realization and to undergo the hardships that he went through. But aside from that, generally most of us will definitely be in worldly daily life and will be bringing what we learn spiritually to our experience. How could it be any other way? And if you read the life stories of great masters, you will find that that's very much the case. In terms of your second question about the decline of the young Tibetan people in terms of language and literature and development, yes, this is true that this is declining. And it's also true that language and literature is declining in China and in other cultures throughout the world. So it's not just only the young Tibetans who are experiencing this. From east to west, we see this occurring in China. We see this occurring in other countries. And so what will happen beyond that, it's hard to know. But it means that each individual should be responsible for upholding their own tradition, their own culture, learning their language, and learning the literature, learning how to read it and how to understand it. And also to learn the important languages that are being used in the world. Unlike me, when I come to the West and I can't speak the language, then I'm handicapped. And so one should know how to understand the predominant world languages and how to read them. I find when I come to America, it's really shocking to encounter the American students who are speaking almost fluent Tibetan and reading the literature very fluently. And I'm really impressed by that, and I think that it's a great example for young Tibetan people that they should do the same. Now the final question.
Yeah, I'm going to take meditation, but I don't know how to take meditation. Then I want to get a brief introduction from Kambalo according to his personal experience and Buddhism. And my second question is, meditation is very popular everywhere, I think, especially in Western countries. Then it's not that popular in Tibetan society. So do you have any plan to encourage lay people to practice meditation?
네. 저 당본的저는 아마 근데 맞소 예오도 전에 디로지도 직셔서 근데 세원에 받대라 세원에 비 탑을 그 그래서 근데 당본 하나 콘셈된 조바다 그 견던 조바다 그 다리 란된 조바다 그 니어른 조바다 더러른 조바다 제버른 조바다 number 제버른 조바다 세스티던 조바 임초 냠버른 조바지 다는 세원에 비 탑을 이 탑을 그도 다 통면에 끝난다나 알란첸다나 등초 그뭐 지거 이모 회의 디체르제네 나 알란첸다 다리 셈다고 또 뇽바 이모 도마르 다리 뭐 어떤 들고네 zonte 하장 다리 까모야 다네 럼기 다리가 저거 다 세원에 비 탑을 그거 럼바 진도 뭐지 나타가 나나 좀 당보 다리 알란첸 그 뭐 알란첸 단더티 다리 케나비 신쇼가 좀 나타다 자토나 요 근데 하장 다리 까모네 남스거네 끝나 알란첸이야 까로고 길 뭐야 까로고 길 지거야 까로고 길 저거 다리가 다 뭐데 지거라 치 미다 알란첸라 치비 되도디 셈데 다리 너터 손데 나 공화 셈다 까지 자야 머도다 알란첸 뇽바 따와진 근데 잠바가 다리가 치리 손에나 셈 왕던 길 뭐도 근데 와스건 삼그 잠베 존디 그 셈 왕던 길 잠베 마존디 셈 왕던 길 뭐도 남지거네 끝나 셈데 다리가 그 하루 지나 저지르다 도파다 당나 간조 강아다나 그 원조게 디모 당조 적 돌아 라운 투지게 근데 이제는 찾기가 뭐 요런데 때에나 사토 이런 거로 이제는 곰도 붙고 또 리데 마라 냠버 잡아 그리고나 리 냠저다 하장 까 나나 주던 데게 또 냠저다 하장 까르치는데 뭐마 딱보와 그다리 곰잡대 곰이 호 마용데 그 말라서 그 곰이 하면 그 쳐로 오잖아 그 딱조 추다리 림 냠셔를 마도 그래서 당상 로총가리 그잖아 림 냠셔 많이 나야 냠다 나더니 여보 용을했다 또때 그렇게 망가지고 때 치르잖아 산기 정도인데요 림 냠을 전했더니 오늘에 당상 다리 곰 다 당선데 야나리 나다가 아메리카 나다가 사차관계 나라나 또 냠잡 곰다 하창까지 치고 또 리그났다 이게 장이다 장나 셈장 이제 또 곰도 굴고 또 하자까지 치는데 되는나 다 제나바간 드네 다리 그 아메리카네 때 상తం 곰에다 하르페 고나라전 고지 말에 월나 다리 상터 페르 그 망가 모요데 제조고 다리 워크 상텀도 다리 아메리카 페나 다리 파실 야 버려서 안 돼. 근데 나나장 내 롭차책 나나 다리에 상tem도 요약하잖아. 하는 등 맞고 되면 장그 다리 망가 그냥 개그 뭐 지낸다지. 저런 습상도 치료 공부를 근데 등등등 치료등 등 가리에서나 탈란네 오늘 그때 잠바리 그 당은 샘다나 줘 삼기 디모레 막도 되면 자메이카 대인이 나도 지금 전에 잡모지 말해. 랑그 세마라 저저기 등을 제가 말해 지이다나. 가서 되는 거뭐 탐쳤다 하장 샘초보라. 샘도 말하다리 그 지즈 지위체는 된자신 디모 잠스레 대인이 나다가 내때나 다 지금 소다리 워크다리 망가 뭐요는 됐다는 가기로선 아니 다 마오네 금나 타바침보 추 저거나 싫나요 다리가 다 당상다리 너쇼나요 노 타바침보 추 송다요 근데 소거장 다리 쳇도장 필고는 말했다나 다 마오네 금나 가정에 보면
When I was in Yale University, the subject that I taught about was contemplative awareness meditation. And so if you were to review those teachings that were given there, but I spoke about the 9 modes of placement, which culminate in the accomplishment of shamatha meditation, which is qualified shamatha meditation, or in English, tranquil stillness. So those 9 modes of placement are, and these are just terms, of course there's a whole teaching that goes with each one of them, placement, continual placement, persistent placement, proximate placement, taming, pacifying, proximate pacifying, single-pointed placement, and then equanimity. In the end, the 9th means evenness or equanimity is achieved. At which time one is approaching shamatha, accomplishment of tranquil stillness. Now the mind is at peace. And so these different stages that move towards the accomplishment of tranquil stillness are likened to the illustration that we also have in our tradition, which is the elephant, who represents the wild mind, the crazed elephant that needs to be tamed. And so there's the monkey there, which represents the monkey of the mind as well, and that both of these must become exhausted. And so if you look at the illustration, you can see how these stages of placement are passed through as one moves towards the complete quiescence of mental distraction and disturbance. Because initially, during the first stages of placement, one is unable to master mindfulness, but that gradually, by persistently resting in contemplative awareness, then eventually one is able to achieve mastery. And once total mastery is achieved, that's the 9th stage of accomplishment, which is this evenness, and then one can remain in a state of peaceful tranquility like a mountain, immovable. One is not disturbed by conflicting emotions or the proliferation of thoughts, at which time the mind is flexible and also functional. So it's not just dull, but that has capacity to be in control of itself, as flexible and functional. And the other aspect to this is knowing how to sit in the correct posture, the meditation posture, which is the classic posture called the 7-point posture of Buddha Vairochana, where the legs are in full lotus and so forth. There's 7 points to the posture. At one time, Gampopa asked Milarepa why his meditation wasn't proceeding, and he said, it's because you're not sitting in the correct posture. And I've heard that there are some who teach that you can actually sleep and meditate, and that would be acceptable. Like laying down, rather, not falling asleep, but in a sleeping posture, and meditate, and that would be acceptable. Why? Because Buddha Shakyamuni was in this reclining posture when he passed into parinirvana, at which time he was in contemplative meditation, obviously, because he's passing into parinirvana. So that it would be okay for us to also recline and meditate. But this is not the case at all. As a beginner who is training to accomplish this, you have to keep your body erect. And the reason for that is because if the body is straight, then the channels, the psychic channels within your body will be in their correct position, and then the winds will be able to flow through the channels unimpededly, and one will be able to render the mind functional in that process. And that this is crucial to the success of contemplative meditation. And therefore, those things need to be known and studied, and you can continue to work towards accomplishing tranquil stillness. And also I wanted to say that there are some who say that here in America it's not necessary to do this. You can just accomplish contemplative meditation by just sitting there and kind of zoning out, as it were. I mean, I say that because I asked, well, what is the main emphasis when you see these people just sitting in meditation? Well, they're just watching their thoughts and then going back, bringing their mind back, and then watching another thought and bringing their mind back. Well, this is not going to accomplish qualified tranquil stillness in any sense. So I would say it's much better to follow the time-tested success of the Tibetan tradition in terms of this kind of contemplative meditative process, because it will definitely work. If you're just sitting there and relaxing, you might not even know what's happening, and the time is passing and it's over. And so I think it's valuable to rely on the many methods that we have in our Tibetan tradition. And then finally, you asked about Mahayana Buddhism, something about that, but Khenpo said there are many teachings on that subject in the West already.
Okay, thank you all.